When humanity's golden god crashes into hell's darkest corner, even demons learn to pray. The air tastes like eternity burning, the ground remembers every soul it swallowed. 10,000 years of suffering taught him patience, hell teaches only rage. What happens when the master of mankind meets the one mortal even demons fear? The golden throne failed. After 10,000 years of endless vigilance and unimaginable suffering, the ancient mechanisms sustaining the master of mankind finally surrendered to entropy. Throughout the Imperium, a psychic scream tore through reality as his divine consciousness, compressed for millennia into a withered corpse, erupted in a supernova of golden light that consumed terror itself. The Emperor was no more, yet he was everywhere. His fractured soul cast into the infinite darkness of the cosmos, but not into death, not into peace. The fabric of reality split before the Emperor's unfathomable psychic might, the laws of physics themselves giving way as his consciousness punctured through dimensions. He fell through madness and void, through nightmares and forgotten hells, until at last he descended into a realm where corruption was not merely present, but sovereign. A universe where demons ruled openly, where hell itself had breached the material plane and claimed dominion. He awoke upon blood-soaked stone, golden armor cracked but intact, the intricate eagles and lightning bolts still gleaming despite the crimson that washed over them. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Emperor of mankind stood upon his own 2 feet. His face, regal and ancient, bearing the marks of every human civilization that had ever existed, gazed upon this new hell with eyes that burned like twin suns. Around him stretched a vast cathedral of bone and sinew, its architecture an offense to reason. Pillars of screaming faces reached toward a ceiling where reality itself seemed to bleed. The air tasted of sulfur and despair, thick with the stench of corruption that reminded him of the foulest depths of the warp. But this was not the immaterium. This was something older, something primal, as if reality itself had an underside where nightmares gestated before birth. Unexpected arrival, a voice whispered, echoing from everywhere at once. Godflesh detected. New father candidate identified. The Emperor's hand moved to his waist, finding the hilt of his flaming sword still secured there. With a thought, he ignited it, golden flames casting harsh shadows across the horrific chamber. The fire of his blade was not merely physical but psychic, burning with the collective faith of humanity, with the last desperate prayers of trillions who had worshipped him despite his explicit command not to. "I am no one's father here," the Emperor spoke, his voice resonating with such authority that the very stones of the cathedral trembled. "I seek only passage back to my Imperium." A sound like laughter rippled through the chamber, wet and obscene. From alcoves and shadowed corners, figures began to emerge. Some walked on twisted legs while others slithered or crawled. Their flesh was an abomination, fused with metal and bone in ways that would make even the most debased Dark Mechanicum Magos recoil. They carried weapons that pulsed with unnatural energy, glowing with a reddish hue that reminded the Emperor of the psychic signature of the warp, yet fundamentally different. "The Father's throne lies empty," one of the larger creatures gurgled, its mouth splitting into quarters to reveal rows of metallic teeth. "The Dark Lords have fallen. The divinity protocols must be satisfied. You will be tested, consumed, or enthroned." The Emperor's response was not in words but in action. Golden light erupted from his form, a psychic nova that instantly vaporized the nearest abominations. Their flesh boiled away as their twisted souls were scoured from existence by his divine wrath. The chamber itself buckled under the pressure of his power, ancient stone cracking as reality struggled to contain such raw psychic force. The remaining creatures shrieked and opened fire, projectiles of energy and twisted metal hurtling toward the Emperor. With contemptuous ease, he raised his hand, creating a psychic barrier that absorbed the assault. The creatures' weapons continued to fire until they overheated, the barrels melting in their hands. "I have stood against the ruinous powers," the Emperor declared, advancing toward the surviving demons with measured steps, his sword leaving a trail of golden fire in its wake. I have battled gods and monsters across the span of human history. You are nothing but another corruption to be cleansed." The largest of the creatures, its body a horrific fusion of technology and flesh, backed away. "The Slayer comes for all. The Slayer will come for you as well, false father." The Emperor's sword swept through the air, cleaving the demon from shoulder to hip. As the two halves of its body separated, its blood ignited in the presence of the Emperor's psychic fire, burning with unnatural intensity. "I know not of this Slayer," the Emperor said, as the last of the creatures fled into the shadows, "but if he stands against such as you, perhaps we shall find common cause." Alone in the chamber, the Emperor closed his eyes, extending his psychic senses outward. He could feel the corruption of this realm, a cancer on reality itself. But beyond that, he sensed something else, a presence of immense power moving through the hellscape. Whether it was this Slayer or something else entirely remained to be seen. Opening his eyes, the Emperor of Mankind set his jaw with grim determination. If he could not immediately return to his Imperium, then he would bring the light of humanity to this benighted realm. These demons would learn why, for 40,000 years, he had been the most feared and revered being in human history. With purposeful strides, he moved toward the cathedral's massive doors, each step leaving a brief afterimage of golden light. Beyond those doors lay a landscape of nightmare and madness, but the Emperor had walked through hell before. And this time, he walked not as a prisoner of his own throne, but as a warrior unbound. The doors swung open at his approach, revealing a vista of fire and brimstone. The sky above was the color of spilled blood, split by lightning that struck the twisted spires of distant fortresses. The ground beneath his feet was made of fused bone and ash, crunching with each step. In the distance, massive creatures prowled between towers of flesh and metal, their roars echoing across the blasted landscape. The Emperor's golden armor gleamed incongruously against this backdrop of horror, a beacon of order in a realm of chaos. As he stepped beyond the cathedral's threshold, alarms began to sound throughout the hellscape, a wailing chorus that spoke of intrusion and threat. "Let them come," the Emperor thought. "Let them all come." Deep within the core of hell, in chambers where reality itself was twisted and reforged, ancient machinery hummed with renewed purpose. Sensors designed by minds beyond human comprehension detected the presence of a divine entity, its power signature unlike anything recorded in the annals of the umbral planes. Within a sarcophagus of arcane technology, eyes opened. They were the eyes of a being known by many names across countless realms: Doomslayer, Hell Walker, Unchained Predator. The sensors had awakened him from his rest, called him once more to his eternal purpose. The sarcophagus hissed open, releasing him into the chamber. His armor, an ancient relic enhanced by technologies both human and divine, powered up as he stepped forward. The Praetor suit, marked with runes that told of his endless crusade against demonkind, fit him like a second skin. Without hesitation, he moved to the weapon racks that lined the chamber walls. His arsenal was legend, each weapon a tool of demon destruction perfected over eons of combat. The super shotgun, twin-barreled harbinger of close-range annihilation. The plasma rifle, its energy cells glowing with barely contained power. The BFG 9000, ultimate equalizer against the strongest of Hell's champions. The Slayer checked each weapon with practiced efficiency, loading ammunition with mechanical precision. His movements were economical, devoid of hesitation or doubt. He had done this countless times before, and would do so countless times again. A holographic display activated nearby, showing the anomaly that had triggered the sensors. A figure in golden armor, wreathed in light that burned the very air around it, cutting a path of destruction through Hell's legions. The Slayer paused, studying the display. This was not a demon, despite its godlike power, nor was it an angel of Urdak, those manipulative beings who had betrayed him once before. This was something new, something unknown, and anything unknown in Hell was a potential threat. With a final check of his equipment, The Slayer stepped onto a teleportation platform. Coordinates were already set, targeting the strange entity's last known position. There was no contemplation, no doubt in his purpose. The Slayer existed for one reason: to rip and tear until it was done. The teleporter activated, and in a flash of energy, he was gone, hurtling through the dimensions toward yet another battle in his eternal war. The Emperor of Mankind strode through the hellscape, his sword cleaving through any demon foolish enough to approach. They came in waves, each more desperate than the last, driven forward by masters who sensed the threat his presence posed to their corrupt domain. Lesser demons fell by the dozens, their twisted forms no match for the Emperor's martial prowess and psychic might. Even without the full extent of his power, diminished as he was by the catastrophic failure of the Golden Throne, he remained a force beyond the comprehension of these creatures. As he crested a ridge of blackened bone, the Emperor paused to survey the terrain ahead. A vast plain stretched before him, dotted with structures that defied architectural sanity. And at its center, a massive tower rose toward the bloody sky, its surface covered in pulsing veins of energy that the Emperor recognized as conduits of power. A focal point, he murmured, his superhuman mind analyzing the patterns of energy flow. A nexus of whatever passes for natural law in this realm. His contemplation was interrupted by a new sound, a mechanical drone that grew steadily louder. From behind a nearby ridge emerged a floating sphere, its surface covered in lenses and scanning arrays. It hovered at a distance, observing the Emperor with obvious caution. Unauthorized entity detected, the sphere announced, its voice artificial yet carrying an undertone of organic pain, as if whatever consciousness powered it was suffering. Classification: Divine Intruder. Threat level: Catastrophic. Initiating containment protocols. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. I have no quarrel with you, machine. Stand aside. Compliance impossible, the sphere replied. The balance must be maintained. Hell must be contained. Divinity must be regulated. With those words, the sphere emitted a pulse of energy that rippled across the landscape. In response, the ground began to heave and split, disgorging dozens of new demons. But these were different from the rabble the Emperor had faced thus far. They moved with purpose and coordination, wielding weapons that glowed with the same energy that pulsed through the distant tower. UAC automated defense systems activated, the sphere announced. Demonic containment units deployed. The Emperor's face hardened as he raised his sword. So be it. The first wave of demons charged, firing weapons that launched orbs of crackling red energy. The Emperor deflected them with his blade, each impact sending sparks of golden light cascading across the battlefield. As the demons closed in, he unleashed a wave of psychic force that staggered them, following with a series of sword strikes too fast for mortal eyes to follow. Demon bodies fell in pieces, their unnatural blood steaming where it touched the Emperor's armor. Yet still they came, their numbers seemingly endless. Fascinating, the Emperor noted as he impaled a particularly large demon through its core. These are not warp entities. Their corruption is different, more physical than spiritual. A massive demon, twice the height of its fellows, burst from the ground directly beneath the Emperor. He leapt aside with transhuman speed, but not before the creature's claws scored a deep furrow in his golden armor. The Emperor's response was immediate and devastating. He unleashed a focused beam of psychic energy that pierced the demon's chest, exploding it from within in a shower of gore and mechanical components. Partial machine nature, the Emperor observed, scanning the debris with his enhanced senses. A merger of technology and demonic flesh, primitive compared to even the crudest servitor, yet effective in its way. The floating sphere had retreated to a safe distance, still observing. Entity exceeds projected power parameters, it announced. Upgrading threat assessment, alerting Seraphim Council. The Emperor turned his attention to the sphere, his patience exhausted. With a gesture, he reached out with his psychic power, seeking to seize control of the machine's systems. To his surprise, he encountered resistance, not mechanical but spiritual in nature. "Interesting," he said, applying more pressure to his psychic assault. "Your technology is infused with something akin to soul energy, crude but effective." The sphere's surface began to crack, golden light spilling from the fissures as the Emperor's will overwhelmed its defenses. "Critical system failure," it managed to broadcast before exploding in a shower of components and energy. In the sudden silence that followed, the Emperor turned his gaze back to the distant tower. Whatever controlled this realm would be found there, he was certain. And with that control might come the knowledge of how to return to his Imperium, to the children of humanity who needed his guidance now more than ever. He had taken only 3 steps toward the tower when the air before him shimmered and tore. A portal opened, crackling with energy that was neither psychic nor warp-based, but something entirely different. And through this portal stepped a figure that gave even the master of mankind pause. The newcomer was clad in armor that, while less ornate than the Emperor's own, radiated an aura of ancient power. Runes and symbols covered its surface, each one a ward or blessing in a language the Emperor did not recognize. In the figure's hands was a weapon of brutal simplicity, a shotgun modified for purposes that were immediately clear: the destruction of demons. But it was not the armor or the weapon that caused the Emperor's momentary hesitation. It was the sheer presence of the being before him, the aura of single-minded purpose and unfathomable rage that emanated from every fiber of his existence. Here was a being who had faced the horrors of this realm not as a god or emperor, but as a mortal man, and had not merely survived but thrived. "The Slayer," the Emperor said, recognizing the name the demons had spoken in fear. "I had wondered when we would meet." The Slayer made no response, his helmeted face revealing nothing of his thoughts. He simply raised his weapon, pointing it not at the Emperor, but past him, at a new wave of demons approaching from behind. The Emperor nodded, understanding perfectly. Words were unnecessary between warriors with a common enemy. He turned, his flaming sword at the ready, standing back to back with the Slayer as the demons closed in. "Let us show these abominations the meaning of true warfare," the Emperor said, his voice resonating, with the authority of 10,000 years of rule. The Slayer's response was the thunderous report of his shotgun as the battle was joined once more. The demons came at them from all directions, a tide of corrupted flesh and twisted metal. The Emperor's sword carved golden arcs through the air, each swing cleaving through multiple foes. Beside him, the Slayer's shotgun boomed with mechanical precision, each shell finding its mark in demonic flesh. They fought as if they had battled side by side for centuries, their movements complementing each other without need for coordination or command. Where the Emperor struck with the calculated precision of a master swordsman, the Slayer fought with brutal efficiency, each movement designed to inflict maximum damage with minimum effort. A massive demon, its body a horrific fusion of flesh and artillery, lumbered toward them, multiple cannons charging with hellish energy. The Emperor raised his hand, creating a psychic barrier that absorbed the first barrage. The Slayer used this moment to close the distance, leaping with inhuman agility onto the creature's back. With practiced movements, he jammed the barrel of his shotgun into a vulnerable joint and pulled the trigger, the explosion severing the demon's spine. As the creature fell, the Emperor was already moving to the next threat, his sword separating a flying demon's wings from its body before impaling it through its single eye. The Slayer, meanwhile, had switched to a heavier weapon, a cannon that launched globes of superheated plasma into the densest concentrations of enemies. "They fight without strategy," the Emperor observed as he crushed a lesser demon's skull with his armored boot. "They rely on overwhelming numbers rather than tactical thought." The Slayer grunted in what might have been agreement as he executed a glory kill on a staggered demon, ripping its arm off and using it to cave in its skull. The brutal efficiency of the act impressed even the Emperor, who had witnessed the savage fury of space marines in combat for millennia. As the battle raged on, the Emperor began to notice patterns in the demonic assault. They were being herded, channeled toward the distant tower by the placement and movement of the demonic forces. It was a crude strategy, but effective in its simplicity. "They draw us toward their center of power," the Emperor said during a momentary lull in the fighting. "A trap, perhaps, or a test." The Slayer nodded once, then pointed to a structure off to their left, a twisted parody of a fortress that seemed to pulse with the same energy that flowed through the tower. He made a series of hand gestures that the Emperor, with his vast knowledge of human communication across the ages, recognized as a simplified battle sign, a detour to destroy their secondary power source. The Emperor translated, "Strategically sound, it will weaken whatever awaits us at the tower." The Slayer nodded again, then turned and began making his way toward the fortress, his movements purposeful and direct. The Emperor followed, impressed by the mortal's tactical acumen. This Slayer was clearly more than a simple berserker. He was a true warrior who understood the art of war on a fundamental level. As they approached the fortress, its defenses activated. Turrets emerged from organic-looking bulges in the walls, tracking their movement with malevolent precision. Before they could fire, the Slayer had already switched weapons, bringing to bear what appeared to be a precision rifle of advanced design. With 3 rapid shots, he disabled the nearest turrets. The Emperor, meanwhile, reached out with his psychic senses, mapping the interior of the fortress. What he found was both fascinating and disturbing. "The structure is semi-sentient," he informed the Slayer. "Its internal layout shifts in response to perceived threats. And at its core, there is a power source unlike anything in my experience, a fusion of technology and what I can only describe as soul energy." The Slayer simply chambered around in his rifle and pointed to a doorway that had appeared in the fortress wall, an entrance that pulsed with sickly light. The message was clear. Whatever lay within, they would face it together. As they crossed the threshold, the air itself seemed to resist their passage, thick with malevolence and the stench of corruption. The interior of the fortress was a nightmare of organic architecture, walls that breathed and floors that squelched beneath their boots. Veins of energy pulsed through everything, carrying power to and from the central chamber. They encountered resistance almost immediately, demons emerging from alcoves and dropping from the ceiling. The confined space limited the Emperor's use of his sword, but he adapted seamlessly, channeling his psychic might through his armored fists instead. Each punch landed with the force of an artillery shell, demon bodies rupturing under the impact. The Slayer had switched back to his shotgun, the weapon ideal for the close quarters. He moved with practiced efficiency, each shot followed by a brutal melee attack that maximized damage and conserved ammunition. The Emperor noted that despite the seemingly endless hordes they faced, the Slayer was careful with his resources, retrieving ammunition from fallen enemies when possible. They fought their way deeper into the fortress, the resistance growing fiercer with each chamber they passed through. In one vast room, they faced a horde of lesser demons led by a massive champion, its body covered in plates of metal fused directly to its flesh, eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "The False Father and the Slayer unite," the champion growled, its voice a distortion of something once human. "The prophesied union that heralds the end times. The Khan Maker must be informed." "I tire of being called father by abominations," the Emperor said, his voice cold with disdain. "I am the Emperor of mankind, guardian of humanity's destiny. And you are nothing but corruption to be excised." The demon champion laughed, the sound like metal being torn. "Your arrogance blinds you, Golden One. You stand in the realm of the true gods, the creators of all dimensions. Your mankind is but a failed experiment, a breeding ground for the soul energy that sustains us." The Emperor's face hardened, his eyes blazing with increased intensity. "I have heard such claims before, from entities that called themselves gods. The chaos powers of my realm made similar boasts before I cast them down. The chaos gods," the demon spat, "pale shadows, feeding on scraps. We are the original darkness, the primal force from which all corruption springs." The Slayer had clearly heard enough. Without warning, he charged the demon champion, his shotgun barking once before he crashed into the creature with the force of a freight train. The impact staggered the massive demon, allowing the Slayer to execute a series of brutal attacks that tore chunks from its armored hide. The champion roared in pain and rage, swinging a massive arm that caught the Slayer and sent him flying across the chamber. He crashed into a wall with bone-crushing force, but was on his feet again in an instant, switching to a heavier weapon that the Emperor recognized as a rocket launcher of unusual design. The Emperor seized the opportunity provided by the Slayer's assault, launching his own attack from the opposite direction. His flaming sword cut through the champion's armor like paper, severing one of its arms at the shoulder. The demon howled, black ichor spurting from the wound, but it was far from defeated. With its remaining arm, it generated a sphere of crackling red energy that it hurled at the Emperor. The Emperor deflected the energy sphere with his sword, sending it careening into a group of lesser demons that were attempting to flank them. The resulting explosion atomized the lesser creatures and shook the chamber violently. "Your weapons are impressive," the Emperor acknowledged as he closed in for another attack. "But they are nothing compared to the psychic arts I have mastered over millennia." To demonstrate, he extended his hand toward the champion, golden light gathering around his fingertips. The light lanced forward, penetrating the demon's chest and erupting from its back in a cascade of power. The champion's roar of pain was cut short as the light expanded within it, consuming it from the inside out until nothing remained but drifting ash. The lesser demons, witnessing the destruction of their leader, hesitated. It was all the opening the Slayer needed. His rocket launcher spoke 3 times in rapid succession, each projectile finding its mark in the center of a demon cluster. The explosions ripped through their ranks, leaving nothing but scattered remains. In the silence that followed, the Emperor turned to the Slayer, a new respect in his ancient eyes. "You fight with a fury I have seen only in the greatest of my space marines. Yet you maintain control, purpose. You are no berserker, but a true warrior." The Slayer reloaded his weapons, his helmeted face giving away nothing of his thoughts. But he nodded once in acknowledgement of the Emperor's words before gesturing toward a massive door at the far end of the chamber, sealed with both physical locks and glowing sigils of power. "The core," the Emperor confirmed, extending his senses once more. "Beyond that door lies the power source of this fortress. Destroy it, and we weaken whatever entity controls the central tower." The Slayer approached the door, examining the locks and sigils with practiced eyes. From a compartment in his armor, he produced a blue sphere of energy, placing it against the center of the door. He stepped back, motioning for the Emperor to do the same. The sphere pulsed once, twice, then detonated in a controlled explosion that shattered the physical locks. The sigils flared in response, trying to maintain the seal. But the Emperor raised his hand, golden light streaming from his palm to counter the demonic energy. Under their combined assault, the door gave way, crumbling into dust. Beyond lay a chamber unlike any other in the fortress. Where the rest of the structure had been a nightmare of organic horror, this room was almost sterile in its technological precision. At its center floated a sphere of crimson energy, suspended between pillars of metal, inscribed with runes similar to those on the Slayer's armor. "Argent energy," the Emperor murmured, recognizing the signature from the weapons they had faced. A form of power drawn from soul energy, but processed and refined. "In my realm, such technology would be considered the darkest of heretics, a perversion of the human soul itself." The Slayer nodded grimly, then pointed to the base of each pillar, where control panels glowed with the same reddish light. His intent was clear: destroy the controls, destabilize the energy sphere. "A sound strategy," the Emperor agreed, "but we must be prepared for the consequences. Destroying such a concentration of energy will not be without effect." The Slayer was already moving, approaching the nearest control panel with determined strides. The Emperor took position at another, examining the alien technology with his superhuman intellect. Despite the unfamiliar design, the principles were comprehensible to his ancient mind. "On my mark," the Emperor commanded, his hands poised above the control panel. 3, 2, 1. Now. In perfect synchronization, they deactivated the stabilization systems, the Emperor through direct manipulation of the controls, the Slayer through the more direct approach of smashing the panel with the butt of his shotgun. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The energy sphere began to pulse erratically, expanding and contracting as its containment field failed. Arcs of crimson lightning lashed out, scorching chamber walls and forcing both warriors to take cover. The very air began to warp around the sphere, reality itself struggling to contain the unleashed power. "We must withdraw," the Emperor shouted over the rising crescendo of energy. "The reaction has become self-sustaining. This entire structure will be consumed." The Slayer was already at the chamber entrance, gesturing urgently for the Emperor to follow. They raced through the fortress, retracing their steps as the building began to collapse around them. Walls buckled and floors heaved as the chain reaction spread from the core, corrupted flesh and metal alike, disintegrating under the strain. They burst through the main entrance just as the fortress imploded behind them, collapsing in on itself with a sound like a dying god's last breath. A shockwave of energy rolled outward, washing over them with the heat of 1,000 suns. The Emperor raised a psychic barrier that sheltered them both from the worst of the blast, though even his mighty powers were taxed by the effort. When the dust settled, nothing remained of the fortress but a smoking crater. The corrupted earth around it, purified by the intensity of the explosion. In the distance, the central tower's pulsing veins of energy had dimmed noticeably, its connection to the fortress severed. A significant blow to their power network, the Emperor observed, satisfaction evident in his voice. "The entity at the tower will have felt that loss." The Slayer nodded in agreement, already checking his weapons and ammunition. His armor showed signs of battle damage, scorch marks and dents that would have killed a lesser being, yet he moved without any indication of pain or fatigue. The Emperor studied him with renewed interest. "You are not fully human, are you?" "Not anymore. Your battles have changed you, just as my own ascension transformed me from the man I once was." The Slayer paused in his preparations, his helmeted face turning toward the Emperor. For a moment, it seemed he might speak, might share something of his own long history. But the moment passed, and he simply returned to his weapons check. The Emperor nodded, understanding the warrior's focus. "Words matter little in the face of our task. The tower awaits, and with it, answers to the questions that brought us both to this point." Together, they turned toward the distant spire, their purpose aligned if not identical. Whatever entity ruled this hell, it would soon face the combined might of mankind's emperor and hell's greatest nemesis, and may whatever gods existed have mercy on its soul, for they would have none. The journey to the central tower was unexpectedly quiet. After the destruction of the fortress, the demonic forces had withdrawn, either regrouping or perhaps waiting in ambush at the tower itself. The landscape they crossed was a nightmare vision of corruption, once natural features twisted into parodies of themselves, mountains that resembled piles of screaming, faces, rivers of what appeared to be blood flowing between shores of shattered bone. The Emperor walked alongside the Slayer, his psychic senses extended to their maximum range, searching for threats and information alike. What he found troubled him deeply. "This realm shares certain similarities with the warp of my universe," he explained to the silent Slayer. "Both are dimensions of corruption that seek to invade and corrupt the material plane. But where the warp is a reflection of sentient emotion, this hell seems more purposeful, designed rather than evolved." The Slayer gave no indication whether he understood or cared about the Emperor's observations. His focus remained unwavering, his stride constant as they approached the massive tower that now dominated the horizon. As they drew closer, details of the structure became clearer. What had appeared to be a single tower was in fact a complex of interconnected spires, each one pulsing with energy that flowed upward toward a central point high above. The base of the complex was surrounded by a vast wall, its surface covered in symbols that even the Emperor, with his knowledge of countless languages across human history, could not decipher. A fortress within a fortress, the Emperor noted, the seat of power for whatever entity rules this domain. They were still a kilometer from the outer wall when the air before them shimmered and tore. A portal opened, larger and more stable than any they had seen thus far. From within emerged a figure unlike any demon they had encountered. It was humanoid, but taller than even the Emperor, its body clad in armor of gleaming silver and gold that stood in stark contrast to the corrupted landscape. Wings of light extended from its back, not organic, but composed of energy that shifted and flowed in complex patterns. Its face was concealed behind a mask of metal that resembled nothing so much as a stylized sun. "Doom Slayer," the figure spoke, its voice resonating with harmonics that were almost painful to hear. "Your interference has been noted and tolerated due to the Covenant. But this," it gestured toward the Emperor, "this breaches all agreements. A divine entity from another dimension cannot be allowed to disrupt the balance." The Slayer's response was to raise his shotgun, but the winged figure made a dismissive gesture. "Your weapons cannot harm me here, outside the hunting grounds. I come not to fight, but to offer terms." The Emperor stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his still-sheathed sword. "You are not a demon, yet you consort with them. Explain yourself." The figure turned its masked face toward him, the eyeless visage somehow conveying contempt. "I am Samur Maker, Seraphim to the Khan Maker, voice of the Luminarium, and you, golden intruder, are an anomaly that threatens the cosmic balance we have maintained for eons." "I seek only to return to my own realm," the Emperor replied, his voice level despite the growing sense that this being represented a significant threat. "I have no interest in your cosmic balance or the corruption it clearly permits." Samur made a sound that might have been laughter. "Return? There is no return from hell, Golden One, only consumption or transcendence. The Khan Maker offers you the latter, a place among the Maker hierarchy, your divine essence preserved and elevated, rather than devoured by the demons you so eagerly slaughter." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, golden light intensifying around his form. "I have been offered godhood before, by entities far more impressive than your absent Khan. I refuse them as I refuse you now. I am the Emperor of mankind, guardian of humanity's destiny. I will not be seduced by promises of power when my people need me." "Your people? Your people?" Samur's voice took on a mocking tone. "Your Imperium burns without you, Golden One. Billions die as your absence unleashes the very chaos you sought to contain. Even now, your sons tear each other, apart in a war for your empty throne." The Emperor's face remained impassive, but his eyes blazed brighter at the Seraphim's words. "You know nothing of my realm or my sons. Your attempts at manipulation are as transparent as they are pathetic." Samur turned to the Slayer, who had remained motionless throughout the exchange, his shotgun still raised. "And you, Doom Slayer, have you told your new ally of your own past? Of how you were once a simple mortal, driven mad by the loss of your child, before my gift elevated you beyond humanity? Does he know that it was I who gave you the strength to become the scourge of hell?" The Slayer's response was a single step forward, his body language radiating such intense hostility that even Samur took a step back. "I see time has not dimmed your rage," the Seraphim said, regaining his composure. "Very well. If you both reject the Khan Maker's generous offer, then you leave us no choice but to consider you both threats to the cosmic balance. The consequences will be significant." With those words, Samur gestured, and the portal behind him expanded dramatically. From within poured a new type of entity, neither demon nor angel, but something in between. They were humanoid but elongated, their bodies covered in armor similar to Samur's but darker, corrupted. Where the Seraphim's wings were composed of pure light, theirs were made of shadow and flame. "Behold the fallen," Samur announced, spreading his arms wide. "Maykrias who have tasted the essence of hell and embraced it. They combine the divine power of Urdak with the ravenous strength of the demons you fought. They are the Khanmaker's answer to both the Slayer's defiance and your unwelcome arrival. The Emperor assessed the new threat with the cold calculation of a being who had led armies for millennia. These fallen were clearly powerful, their auras registering on his psychic senses as comparable to greater daemons of the warp. But they were not invincible, and their corruption made them vulnerable to his particular brand of psychic fire. Your Khan sends soldiers to do what you dare not attempt yourself, the Emperor observed, drawing his flaming sword. A leader who will not fight their own battles deserves neither respect nor obedience. Samur's mask revealed nothing of his reaction, but his voice carried a hint of anger when he spoke. The Khanmaker need not sully her hands with such as you. The fallen will return your essence to the great cycle, where it belongs. With those words, Samur retreated through the portal, which sealed behind him, leaving them to face the assembled fallen. There were a dozen of the corrupted angels, each armed with weapons that crackled with both divine and demonic energy. The Emperor looked to the Slayer, who had already switched to his heavy cannon. It seems diplomacy has failed yet again, he said with the faintest hint of humor. Shall we show these fallen angels the error of their ways? The Slayer's response was to fire his first shot, the round taking one of the fallen directly between its glowing eyes. The corrupted angel's head snapped back, but it remained standing, dark ichor leaking from the wound as it spread its wings of shadow and flame. More resilient than their demonic cousins, the Emperor noted as he raised his sword, but still mortal, still corruptible, and therefore still able to die. The fallen charged as one, their weapons discharging blasts of energy that combined the searing heat of hell with the purifying light of Urdak. The Emperor erected a psychic barrier that absorbed the worst of the barrage, but even his mighty powers were tested by the unique nature of the attack. The Slayer, meanwhile, had adopted a different strategy. Instead of standing his ground, he used his incredible agility to flank the fallen, his heavy cannon firing continuously as he circled the battlefield. Each shot struck with pinpoint accuracy, targeting joints and connection points in the fallen's armor, gradually weakening their defense. The Emperor, seeing the Slayer's strategy, adjusted his own approach. He channeled his psychic might into his sword, the golden flames growing in intensity until they rivaled the light of a sun. With each swing, he released a wave of purifying fire that washed over the fallen, burning away the corruption that sustained them. The fallen fought with the coordination of beings who had once been part of a greater hierarchy, their attacks synchronized to overwhelm their opponents. One would create an opening that another would exploit, their movements complementary and precise. But for all their divine origin and demonic enhancement, they faced opponents who had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of war. The Emperor, with his millennia of combat experience against the demonic and the divine alike, anticipated their patterns and countered with devastating effect. The Slayer, driven by an unquenchable rage and armed with weapons specifically designed to destroy hellish entities, systematically dismantled their defenses. One by one, the fallen began to fall in truth. The first died when the Emperor's sword separated its head from its shoulders, the golden flames cauterizing the wound and preventing any hellish regeneration. The second fell to the Slayer's glory kill, his armored hands ripping its corrupted heart from its chest and crushing it. The remaining fallen, recognizing the threat they faced, attempted to withdraw and regroup. The Emperor would not allow it. With a gesture, he created a dome of psychic energy that surrounded the battlefield, cutting off their retreat. "There is no escape," he declared, his voice resonating with authority that had commanded the loyalty of trillions. "Your corruption ends here." The trapped fallen fought with increased desperation, their attacks growing wilder and less coordinated. It was exactly what the Slayer had been waiting for. He switched to his most devastating weapon, the BFG 9000, its energy cells glowing with barely contained power. The Emperor, recognizing the weapon's potential, created an opening in the fallen's ranks with a sweeping attack that forced them to cluster together. The Slayer took the shot, the BFG discharging a sphere of green energy that engulfed 3 of the fallen in its initial blast. Tendrils of the same energy lashed out at the others, drawing their life force into the growing maelstrom. When the energy dissipated, nothing remained of those caught in the blast but drifting ash. The survivors, weakened and disorganized, were easy prey for the Emperor's sword and the Slayer's remaining arsenal. The last of the fallen died with the Emperor's blade through its chest and the Slayer's shotgun against its head, the combined attack ensuring there would be no resurrection from its dual nature. In the silence that followed, the Emperor surveyed the battlefield, noting with approval that the Slayer was already retrieving ammunition and energy cells from the fallen enemies, ever practical in his eternal war. They were formidable, the Emperor acknowledged, but ultimately flawed. Their corruption made them vulnerable to my purifying fire, just as the daemons of my realm cannot stand against the light of human faith. The Slayer nodded once, having completed his salvage operation. He gestured toward the central tower, which now loomed directly before them, its massive gates sealed with both physical and mystical barriers. Yes, the Emperor agreed, following the Slayer's gaze. The time for skirmishes is past. We must confront the master of this realm directly. Together, they approached the tower gates, each step bringing them closer to a confrontation that would reshape the destiny of not one universe, but 2. The gates of the central tower were monumental, stretching hundreds of meters high, and crafted from what appeared to be a fusion of metal and bone. Inscribed upon their surface were scenes depicting the conquest of countless worlds by demonic legions, the subjugation of entire species, and the harvesting of their essence for some terrible purpose. The Emperor studied these carvings with growing concern. These are not merely decorative, he observed. They are historical records, a chronicle of consumption that spans dimensions. If what is depicted here is accurate, then the threat posed by this hell extends far beyond either of our realms. The Slayer's attention was focused not on the carvings, but on the mechanisms that secured the gates. With practiced eyes, he identified the weak points, the junctures where physical force would be most effective. He placed his hand against one such point, then looked to the Emperor, his intent clear, a combined assault. The Emperor nodded in understanding. My psychic might to disrupt the mystical barriers, your raw strength against the physical structure. A sound strategy. The Emperor closed his eyes, extending his senses to map the complex web of energy that sealed the gates. It was an intricate pattern, layers of protection that drew power from both the demonic essence of hell and the corrupted divinity of fallen makers. On my mark, the Emperor said, golden light gathering around his outstretched hands. 3, 2, 1, now. Golden fire erupted from the Emperor's palms, searing through the mystical barriers with the focused intensity of a star's core. Simultaneously, the Slayer struck the gate with a force that would have shattered reinforced adamantium, his Praetor suit amplifying his already formidable strength. The combined assault sent shockwaves through the entire structure. Cracks appeared in the massive gates, spreading outward from the point of impact like a web. The mystical barriers flickered and warped, trying to maintain their integrity against the Emperor's onslaught. For a moment, it seemed the gates would hold. Then, with a sound like the death cry of a titan, they gave way, collapsing. Inward in a cascade of debris and dissipating energy, beyond lay a vast chamber that defied mortal architecture. The ceiling stretched so high it was lost in shadow, while the floor was a mosaic of what appeared to be souls trapped in crystal, their faces contorted in eternal agony. Pillars of pulsing red energy rose at regular intervals, each one connected to a central dais by streams of the same energy. And upon that dais stood a figure that radiated such power that even the Emperor felt a moment of caution. The Khan Maker was twice the height of a normal human, her form encased in armor of such intricate design that it appeared almost organic. Wings of pure light extended from her back, forming a halo of radiance that illuminated the chamber. Her face was concealed behind a mask of gold that resembled a stylized sun, similar to Samur's but more elaborate, more regal. The Slayer returns to Urdak, as was prophesied, the Khan Maker spoke, her voice resonating with harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. And he brings with him the golden stranger, the divine anomaly who walks between worlds. The Emperor stepped forward, his sword held at his side but not yet ignited. I am the Emperor of mankind, sovereign ruler of the Imperium of man. I come seeking passage back to my realm, not conflict with yours. The Khan Maker made a gesture that might have been dismissive. Your realm, Emperor of mankind, is but one of countless dimensions that feed the great cycle. Your presence here disrupts a balance maintained over eons, a harmony between Hell, Urdak, and the mortal realms. I have seen your harmony, the Emperor replied, his voice cold. It is built on the suffering of innocence, on the corruption of souls. Such a balance deserves to be disrupted. You speak of concepts you cannot comprehend, the Khan Maker said. The cycle of consumption and rebirth sustains all reality. The demons feed on the souls of mortals, yes, but those souls are reborn in new forms, new dimensions. And we, the Makers, ensure that the consumption never exceeds the creation. The Slayer had been scanning the chamber as they spoke, his posture tense with recognition. He had faced the Khan Maker before, the Emperor realized, and knew what threat she posed. Your Slayer understands, even if he refuses to accept it, the Khan Maker continued, noticing the Slayer's vigilance. He has seen the truth of the cycle, how it perpetuates existence itself, yet still he fights against it, driven by a rage that blinds him to the greater necessity. I have heard such justifications before, the Emperor said, memories of his own long war against chaos rising unbidden, from entities that called themselves gods, that claimed their predations were necessary for the continuation of reality. I rejected their claims then, as I reject yours now. The Khan Maker's wings flared brighter, her posture stiffening with what might have been anger. You are, not in your Imperium now, Golden One. Here, the laws of reality are as I have shaped them, in accordance with the will of the Father. And who is this Father you serve? The Emperor demanded. Another parasite feeding on the souls of innocence? The Father is the creator of all dimensions, all realities, the Khan Maker replied. It was he who established the cycle, who crafted Hell as the forge of souls and Urdak as its governor. And it is his will that you, anomaly that you are, be incorporated into the cycle rather than allowed to disrupt it. The Emperor's patience reached its end. I have met self-proclaimed creators before. In the end, they bled and died like any mortal. If your father stands between me and my return to the Imperium, then he will share their fate. The Khan Maker raised her hand, energy gathering around her form. You speak blasphemy, Golden One. The Father cannot be slain, for he is reality itself. But you, for all your divine power, are still bound by the Drand, laws of existence. And those laws decree that all who enter Hell must eventually be consumed. The Slayer had heard enough. Without warning, he opened fire on the Khan Maker, his heavy cannon discharging a barrage of energy projectiles that streaked toward her with unerring accuracy. The Khan Maker made no move to dodge. The projectiles struck her armored form and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by a shield of light that surrounded her. Your weapons failed against me before, Slayer. Did you think they would succeed now? The Emperor ignited his sword, golden flames erupting along its length. Perhaps not alone, but the Slayer does not stand alone this time. With those words, he launched his own attack, not with physical force but with psychic might. Golden light lanced from his outstretched hand, piercing through the Khan Maker's shield with an intensity that caused her to stagger back. Impossible, she gasped, her harmonious voice faltering. No mortal power can breach Makra. Defenses! I am not merely mortal, the Emperor declared, advancing with his sword raised. I am the culmination of humanity's psychic potential, the guardian of mankind's evolution toward a psychic race. Your shields may repel physical attacks, but they are permeable to the power of the mind. The Khan Maker recovered quickly, her wings spreading wide as she rose from the dais, floating above their reach. Then I shall not face you on physical terms. With a gesture, she sent a wave of energy pulsing through the chamber. The trapped souls in the floor began to wail, their crystal prisons cracking as their essence was forcibly extracted. The energy pillars brightened, channeling this harvested power directly to the Khan Maker, her form growing more radiant with each soul consumed. "Behold the true power of Urdak," she intoned, her voice now layered with the screams of the souls she had absorbed, the divine right to reshape reality itself. The very air around them began to warp and twist, gravity shifting unpredictably. Sections of the floor rose while others fell away, revealing chasms that led to seemingly infinite darkness. The Slayer, caught on one such section, leapt with inhuman agility to more stable ground, his weapons never ceasing their barrage despite its apparent ineffectiveness. The Emperor stood unmoved, his psychic power creating a bubble of stability around him. "Reality is indeed malleable," he agreed, "but not solely to your whim." With concentrated effort, he extended his psychic influence outward, countering the Khan Maker's distortions with his own order. It was a battle not of physical strength, but of will, of opposing visions for how reality should function. The Khan Maker redoubled her efforts, drawing even more power from the energy pillars. "You cannot match the combined might of Urdak and Hell," she declared. "The cycle has endured for eons, sustained by the souls of countless dimensions. Your power, great though it may be, is finite." "Perhaps," the Emperor acknowledged, sweat beading on his brow as he maintained his psychic counterforce. "But I need not defeat you alone." He glanced at the Slayer, who had been systematically targeting the energy pillars during their confrontation. 3 had already been destroyed, their connection to the Khan Maker severed. With each one that fell, her control over the chamber's reality diminished noticeably. The Khan Maker realized their strategy too late. "No, the pillars are the conduits of the Father's will. Without them, Urdak itself will fall to chaos." "Then perhaps your father should have chosen a more worthy representative," the Emperor replied, his voice hard with judgment. "One who did not corrupt his supposed harmony with demonic essence." The Slayer destroyed a 4th pillar, the explosion sending shards of crystallized soul essence in all directions. The Khan Maker screamed, a sound that transcended physical hearing and resonated on a spiritual level. Her form flickered, the divine light of her wings dimming momentarily. "You doom not just yourselves, but all reality," she warned, desperation creeping into her voice. "Without the cycle, without the balance between Hell and Urdak, the dimensions will collapse into one another. Then a new order will rise from the ashes of the old," the Emperor declared, seizing the opportunity provided by her weakened state. With a surge of psychic force, he breached her remaining defenses, golden fire washing over her armored form. The Khan Maker writhed in the grip of the Emperor's psychic assault, her once harmonious voice reduced to a cacophony of discordant notes. The Slayer, seeing his opportunity, switched to his most devastating weapon, the BFG 9000, its energy cells glowing with accumulated power. The Emperor, recognizing the Slayer's intent, withdrew his psychic attack just as the BFG discharged. The sphere of green energy engulfed the Khan Maker, its tendrils wrapping around her like hungry serpents, draining her of the very life force she had stolen from countless souls. When the energy dissipated, the Khan Maker remained floating, but her once radiant form was dimmed, her armor cracked, and her wings little more than guttering flames. "You have doomed all," she managed to say before the Slayer leapt an impossible distance, his armored fist connecting with her masked face with such force that the gold crumpled inward. The Khan Maker fell to the dais, her broken body still trying to draw power from the remaining pillars. But the Slayer was relentless. Landing beside her, he seized her head in his hands and, with a single savage motion, tore it from her shoulders. Golden light erupted from the wound, not divine but corrupted, a mixture of maker energy and demonic essence that had sustained her unnatural life. The light spread outward, consuming her body until nothing remained but drifting particles of what might have been soul energy, freed from its prison of flesh and metal. The chamber shuddered, the remaining pillars pulsing erratically as their master's control failed. The trapped souls in the floor began to break free, their crystal prisons shattering as they rose in spectral form, floating upward toward a light that had not been visible before. The Emperor watched this exodus of souls with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "They find their rest at last," he observed. But the Khan Maker's warnings may not have been entirely self-serving. The disruption of this cycle will have consequences beyond what we can see. The Slayer nodded grimly, then pointed to the center of the dais where the Khan Maker had fallen. A sphere of energy was forming there, different from anything they had encountered thus far. It was neither the crimson of Hell's argent energy nor the gold of the Emperor's psychic might, but a swirling vortex of colors that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its depths. A dimensional nexus, the Emperor realized, extending his senses toward the phenomenon. A gateway between realities, revealed by the Khan Maker's death. This could be the path back to my Imperium. The Slayer approached the nexus cautiously, his weapons still at the ready. He studied it for a moment, then turned to the Emperor, making a series of gestures that conveyed his thoughts with surprising clarity. "You believe this is a trap?" the Emperor translated. "That the father the Khan Maker served has arranged this to lure us into a final confrontation." The Slayer nodded once, his helmeted face revealing nothing of his expression but his posture, speaking volumes about his suspicion. "You may well be right," the Emperor acknowledged, "but I have no choice but to risk it. My Imperium needs me, now more than ever. If this nexus can return me to my realm, I must attempt the crossing." The Slayer considered this for a moment, then offered his hand to the Emperor, a warrior's salute from one demon slayer to another. The Emperor clasped the offered hand with his own, respect evident in his ancient eyes. "In all my long existence, I have rarely encountered a mortal warrior worthy of standing at my side. You have earned a place among the greatest heroes of mankind, Slayer. When I return to my Imperium, tales of your deeds will be told alongside those of my own Primarchs." The Slayer nodded once more, then stepped back, gesturing toward the nexus. The message was clear. He would remain to continue his eternal hunt, while the Emperor must return to his own war against the darkness. The Emperor approached the swirling vortex. His psychic senses extended to their maximum range, searching for any sign of deception or danger. What he found was a complex web of dimensional pathways, countless realities connected through this single point in space and time. "I can navigate this," he declared after a moment of study. "My psychic powers allow me to perceive the correct path back to my realm, but once I enter the nexus, there will be no turning back." The Slayer took up position beside the nexus, his weapons ready, clearly intending to guard the Emperor's passage. It was a final act of respect between warriors who had fought side by side against a common enemy. The Emperor paused on the threshold of the dimensional gateway, looking back at the chamber that was already beginning to collapse as the reality-warping powers of the Khan Maker faded. "If your father does reveal himself, give him a battle worthy of remembrance, Doomslayer." With those words, he stepped into the swirling vortex, his golden armor the last thing visible before the nexus consumed him entirely. The Slayer stood alone amid the disintegrating chamber, his vigil unending as realities shifted and dimensions groaned under the strain of the broken cycle. Whatever came next, whether the mysterious father or some new horror from the depths of hell, he would face it as he had always faced such threats, with determination, with fury, and with the absolute certainty that in the end, it would be demons who learned to fear the Doomslayer, not the other way around. In the void between dimensions, the Emperor of mankind hurtled through cascading realities, his psychic light the only constant in a maelstrom of shifting possibilities. Time and space lost all meaning as he navigated the labyrinth of potential universes, guided only by the psychic beacon of humanity's collective soul, the astronomicon that had guided ships through the warp for millennia. As he traveled, he caught glimpses of other realities, worlds where daemons ruled openly, universes where humanity had never evolved, dimensions where the laws of physics themselves were alien and incomprehensible. And in each, he sensed the touch of corruption, the influence of entities that called themselves gods but were in truth parasites feeding on mortal fear and pain. The Khan Maker spoke some truth. He acknowledged to himself as he pushed onward. The darkness is constant across all dimensions. But so too is the light of sentient will, the defiance of those who refuse to surrender to entropy and despair. The journey seemed both instantaneous and eternal, a paradox of dimensional travel that even his superhuman intellect struggled to comprehend. But finally, after what might have been moments or millennia, he sensed a familiar reality approaching, a universe whose psychic signature matched his own. With a final surge of will, the Emperor of Mankind breached the barrier between dimensions and returned to the universe he had sworn to protect. He emerged not on Terra, as he had hoped, but in the void of space, floating amidst the stars of an unknown system. Yet even here, he could sense the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that would guide him home. His golden armor, damaged by battles in a hell dimension beyond comprehension, gleamed in the light of a distant sun. His sword, still crackling with energy drawn from the souls of vanquished demons, hung at his side. The Emperor of Mankind had returned, forever changed by his journey through the hells of doom. The corrupted angels and demon lords he had faced were but shadows compared to the chaos gods that threatened his imperium, yet they had taught him new strategies, new perspectives on the eternal war against the darkness. As he oriented himself toward Terra, preparing for the long journey home, the Emperor reflected on the warrior he had fought alongside, the Doomslayer whose rage and determination had impressed even him. In every universe, there are heroes who stand against the night, the Emperor mused. Perhaps that is the true constant across all dimensions, not the darkness but those who defy it. With that thought, he began his return to the Imperium of Man, to a war that had raged for millennia and would rage for millennia more. But he returned with new purpose, new resolve, and the knowledge that even in the darkest hell, the light of humanity could never truly be extinguished. Behind him, across the gulf of dimensions, the Doomslayer continued his eternal hunt. Two warriors, two dimensions, one purpose, the salvation of all that was worthy of salvation and the destruction of all that was not. The cycle was broken, but a new order would rise from its ashes. And woe to any daemon, any god, any cosmic entity that stood in their way. For against the doom of worlds, they alone stood defiant,